Good evening, Holliston, and welcome to the January 29th meeting of the Holliston School Committee. We are pleased to present Dr. Jennifer Parson tonight. She is a finalist for the role of Superintendent of Schools for Holliston, and we're thrilled to have you here. So I think we will start by introducing ourselves, and then we'll let you introduce yourself. So, Frank.
Yep. Frank Ogora, second year on school committee. No kids in the district. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1-month-old.
I'm Hillary Bresnahan, also my second year on the school committee, and I have 2 children in the district.
Tracy Flecker. I am the newest member of the school committee from last May, and I have 5 children in the district.
And Dawn Naborski. I have 5 children, 4 of which have graduated from the district, and this is my 3rd term on school committee. Welcome.
Dan Alford, nice to see you again. I'm in my 3rd year. I spent 11 years on the finance committee before that. I have 2 children, a 7th grader and a 9th grader, and I'm the chair of the budget subcommittee.
Hi, I'm Joe Peru. This is my 2nd year on the committee, elected with Frank and Hillary. I'm the father of a crazy 5-year-old, and I am the Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee Chairman. So should you get this position, I'm sure we'll see a lot of each other.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I'm Sarah Fitzgerald, chair of the committee, and I've got 3 kids. I've got an 8th grader and a senior and a freshman in college. So anyway, welcome. And why don't you start by, we can have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you into education.
Sure. So I'm Jen Parson, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here. I appreciate everyone's time and hospitality today. It's been a long day. It's been a very good day. I feel like I have a much better sense, even though I'm your kind of neighbor in Milford next door. I feel like I learned a lot about the schools, about the people in the schools, about the families who support the schools and your town partners. I learned a lot more about that today than I would have as just a bystander who drives through. So I've been in education for the majority of my career. I started as a classroom teacher. My very first teaching position was in the Atlanta, Georgia Public Schools. I am from this area, but at the time, there were no jobs around here, and everybody said, go down south, there are lots of jobs. And I got hired on the spot and was a 4th grade teacher for 1 year until I decided I really am more of a New England person and ended up returning here. So since that time, I've done multiple jobs within the confines of public education. I've been a classroom teacher at the elementary level and at the middle school level. I have served as an assistant principal, a principal, assistant superintendent, and currently I'm the superintendent of the Plainville Public Schools. The job I held most recently before this position, and I'm in my 4th year in Plainville, was as the assistant superintendent in the Hopkinton Public Schools, so your neighbor on one of the other sides. And it was during that time that was my first entree as someone who has very much an elementary background. That was really my first entree into secondary ed, and I really grew to love it and enjoy kind of what happens in areas where I never had the opportunity to sit in a classroom. Also during that time and over the course of my career, I have been a sitting member of the Milford School Committee. I joined that committee. I was elected when my kids were in the 5th grade and 2nd grade, and I thought, I'll do school committee someday when my kids are older and I have more time. And somebody said to me, no, you should do it now when your kids are there and you can make a difference. And I had said to someone earlier today, my kids would say, Mom, can you be the room parent? Can you go on the field trips? And given the type of career that I had, no, I couldn't do either of those things, but I knew I could make a difference if I served on the school committee and in the hopes that I had something to offer to our community. And that was a great learning experience for me. It prepared me probably better in some ways than any of the formal education that I also bring to the table. So I wasn't necessarily looking, people say, why Holliston? And I wasn't necessarily looking for a position, but I did see this open up. I saw the posting, and I decided that it might be the right time and the right situation, especially because as I've grown in the position that I have really felt the missing link for me, the missing piece professionally, has been the secondary ed end of things. And part of that, I really didn't anticipate, actually. When you reflect and you learn things about yourself, I didn't realize I was going to feel that way. But so part of that comes actually from my own children and watching their trajectory and watching them with their friends and watching them move through secondary and big decisions and next steps. And what I've learned is there's a lot that I can also share and contribute to kids at that end of the spectrum, in addition to younger students. So when this position opened up, it seemed to me like it might be the perfect opportunity in a town that I'm familiar with, close to my home, but also one that I know has a very solid, strong reputation regionally and within our state. So it was appealing to me for a lot of different reasons.
So we often receive feedback that the district needs to improve in the areas of communication and transparency. How would you ensure effective communication and transparency with the district, educators, and the Holliston community as a whole? What strategies have you employed in your career to build trust and open lines of communications with key stakeholders?
So I am the daughter of a journalist, and so in my world growing up, the idea of communication has always been at the forefront. I lived in a household where written communication, verbal communication, that was always valued and very important. And for me, having gone through a number of positions over the course of my career, I've had the chance to see things that have gone well. I've had the chance to see things that haven't gone well. And I think at the end of the day, when you want to start looking at where do we run into trouble in any organization, it always comes down to communication. Communication, if it's not done properly, is going to impede your ability to have trusting relationships, to have people feel like they can depend on you to do what you say you're going to do. And I don't think it's possible to over-communicate. I did mention in one of the sessions I was in today that you also have to be mindful that families get a lot of communication. So if you think about the family piece, and so I do try to be mindful when one principal sending something out, another principal sending something out, the director of wellness is sending, how do you kind of try to be thoughtful and mindful about not flooding people? Because when you do that, then you might as well send nothing because you've done too much. In terms of my role as a leader, I really do feel, and I've said this a few times today too, I feel like that this is who I am. Who you see tonight is, I do feel that I try to be as authentic as I can. I try to be upfront with people. I do try to be careful in my words. I try to think about how will my message be received by people. And so sometimes I do try to take that extra minute to think about my verbal articulation and written word as well. So I do value communicating with people by being in their presence. In the schools, it's really important. People want to see the leaders. They want to know the leader cares about their classrooms. They want to know that, we have a sense of what they're working through and dealing with. I heard from students today that they absolutely want to see their schools' leaders and administrators around them at their activities in their classrooms. And, I feel that I heard the same from staff today. One thing that I do try to do is in communications, sometimes I do think I'm a little wordy and people will say, try to pare down the words. And so I think about that. But also, one of the ways that I try to connect with people in my written communications is through personal anecdotes. And so if I see something that I think might be appealing to families because I came across an article or I came across a thought that I think is relevant, I will share that, and I will do the same with staff. And that's another way of building relationships, and it's the relationships that bring the trust and help to bring organizations forward.
How do you intentionally build and sustain a safe, positive, and inclusive district culture for all students, staff, and families, particularly those from marginalized groups, immigrant communities, or who may experience prejudice or bullying? Can you share specific examples of policies, practices, or initiatives you have implemented in the past and explain how he would evaluate whether those efforts are having a meaningful and measurable impact on school climate and student well-being. I can repeat any part of that, I know.
Let me think. The first part, can you just repeat the actual very first part of it?
How do you intentionally build and sustain a positive, safe, and inclusive district culture for all students, staff, and families, particularly those from marginalized groups, immigrant communities, or who may experience prejudice or bullying?
Okay. So at the end of the day, I think it comes down to your core values. And what do you believe in, and what do you hold to be true? And, you know, our core values have to be more than words on a piece of paper. They have to be things and actions that we take and that we live. And we need to make sure that in our schools we are very mindful of what those core values are, and they really need to be integrated in every aspect of what we do. And I've walked around your schools and I see some of your core values, CARES. I've seen that all over this district. And in our district, we have an acronym of HEART, which stands for some of the things that we believe in. And I know your town actually uses that that phrase also. When you think about how that translates into kind of the day-to-day, you do need to be aware of, and I need to be aware, if I were to be in this role, of who are our clientele, who are our students. And it's easy to look at the whole. It's more challenging to look at the parts that make up the whole. And through a lot of the work that I've done, both through my doctoral degree and work that I've done through the Mass Association of Superintendents, I have had a focus on equity and a focus on access. And it is our historically marginalized populations that tend to be those who have the greatest challenges accessing what it is we have to offer for lots of different reasons. And we have to understand through the way that we look at our students, through our student I'm not sure what you call it here, the student study teams that we call the best in my district, when we start to really think about what does our data show us, who are our students that aren't succeeding in the manner that we would hope, and we need to start to drill down and understand the reasons why. And is it because they have some core issues that we haven't resolved yet? Is it because they're lacking some basic needs that they may need resources that the schools can help them with? And at the end of the day, all of those subgroups and cohorts, they all need our attention, because if we just paint everything with the same brush, we're not going to dig down into understanding the core reasons for, in some cases, students not succeeding. And we're also not celebrating some of the differences that our students bring to us. So when we look at our students, we should also be thinking about what is important to them, what is their personal identity, what is important to their families. Are we making sure that when we walk through the halls of our buildings, we see things on our walls that reflect our students? We see literature in our classrooms that reflect a wide and diverse variety of individuals that children can relate to. And when we think about a statement that I've said many times is all means all, and there are kids, all of our kids are our kids, and the way that we approach them needs to be inclusive. And those are areas I would allege are difficult and can be tricky, because we don't always give our kids the opportunity to share with us some of the important information that they hold that will help us do a better job. So some of the things that I've done in my work as an assistant superintendent and now superintendent is run professional learning sessions for our faculty and staff. So one of the books that we used for a book study was called We Got This by Cornelius Minor, and that is a book that focuses on one teacher and his journey to help bring an equitable situation to students. Zaretta Hammond is an author that has culturally responsive teaching in the brain that a lot of our educators, I'm sure a lot in Plainville in Holliston have accessed to really think about how are our kids the way they are, and how does their own culture play into how they present to us, and how can we capitalize on the strengths rather than looking at deficits. So I think it's definitely an area that's important to me, that I would want to partner with people on continuing to do better, because we always can.
Can you share specific examples of policies, practice, or initiatives? I know you shared some, but specifically on the ones that had an impact, so that brought meaningful and measurable impact on school climate and student well-being.
So I guess I would say in that regard, a couple of things. One of the things that we focused on this year had to do with students who come to us with some challenging behaviors. And we brought in a guest speaker for the first day of school, Jessica Minahan, to kick off the year with our faculty and staff. And the purpose of that was to think about students' behavior as a form of communication. So we allowed our staff to have access to some of her philosophies, some of her approaches, and that was something that we did for all teachers. We also, knowing that we had several challenging individual situations, we brought her back and we had her meet with specific teams. And we had teams of teachers bring certain student cases, almost like a case consult, and we implemented strategies that she shared with us, but also brought those things into kind of a template that could be shared for other situations. The other thing that we do in our district is what we're calling a whole child review, and that affords us the opportunity to look at children as a whole. We're not just going to look at a child and say, he's really struggling in math, and that's the end of the story. It's here's how they are as a whole. These are the gaps that we're seeing. These are some reasons that we might be able to attribute and some potential strategies and interventions that we want to share with our students. So I think in terms of our, when you talked about practices and policies, another piece of that, it's not a specific policy, but it's a practice. And we've been very committed to the practice of including our students to the greatest extent possible as often as possible. So we would struggle previously with, well, what are we going to do, because this curriculum is really hard and these kids are really struggling and these are complex texts and we don't think these kids are there. So we should pull them out somewhere and instruct them with lesser material. So we have moved away from that, and we have moved to a far more inclusive set of expectations for our students, where we know they can learn, and we're going to make adjustments and amendments to help kids access what we know they should and what they're entitled to. I'm not touching on bullying and all that, but we have those, if those are the kinds of things that you're talking about, and processes for that. And I don't know if you'll touch on that in future questions, but we do, when we think about kids coming and saying, this doesn't feel good to me, I don't, or sometimes the concern will come from a parent. And so we do have a very thorough process where we listen to what our students are telling us or their parents. We conduct investigations. We are very thorough, and I feel that our principals are very good about collaborating and consulting, so we make sure that we don't miss anything in these investigations, and that if there is a situation to be resolved, that we're going to be on that, because we aren't in the business of allowing kids to come to school to a place where they don't feel safe, because that's going to prevent them from learning, and that's just not the way we can operate.
So how do you balance supporting struggling students while also challenging advanced learners to ensure a rigorous education for all? Can you share concrete examples? And kind of along with that, how do you ensure that student voice meaningfully informs district decisions and that students feel heard and valued?
So in terms of differentiating your curriculum, we look at our curriculum and work in partnership with, in some cases, classrooms have support systems already in place. So you might have a special educator, you might have a paraprofessional, you might be working alongside a reading specialist or a reading tutor. And we think about ways that we can say, okay, we have some kids who, as I said earlier, aren't going to access. We have a very rigorous set of expectations in our English language arts program, for example. And we know that kids need to have the content. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at what does our data tell us that our students either are missing or that our students have already mastered and we can move them forward. So things where we can make adjustments would be looking at some of the foundational skills, and this is more of an elementary example right now, and make sure that we design intervention groups. So we look at common skills, we pull students into groups, we make sure that we are actually tapping into any of their need or kind of gap areas, and at the same time making sure that we're finding ways, whether it's they have a book read to them, they have a summary presented to them of the content rather than the full text. They have a partner that they work with to help kind of get through situations with higher level curriculum and text. And for our upper level students, you always have to think about how can we stretch these kids. And one of my pet peeves is if I go in a classroom and I see, everybody doing one problem at a time, because you're losing kids who can move forward and are ready for more. And sometimes in those situations, you're losing kids who aren't getting it because they're just kind of following along with everybody. So a lot of that takes, I would say, a discerning eye on the part of the educators to have a sense of what's going on in the classroom and who needs more. And at the secondary level, sometimes it's putting classes into levels where certain levels of classes have the opportunity to move either at a faster pace or to stretch more or to offer students more opportunities for independent access to topics and exploration. And the same way, breaking things down for kids, it doesn't matter what level you're at. There are some situations where students just simply need scaffolding and they need additional supports to get to the same place. And that really is a skill that teachers develop over time, and it's not easy because you're asking people to individualize and personalize, and that takes time. It takes collaboration with colleagues. It takes professional learning, and sometimes it takes starting in chunks. So it may not be that you're going to make an individual plan for 20-something children, but maybe we start by saying, we're going to have several different options today, and I'm going to help you students decide which option is going to be the just right one for you today. There might have been a second part to your question.
Talking a little bit about student voice and how do you make sure that students feel seen and heard and valued?
Yeah, and I think there are ways that we do that systematically. So, for example, the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey is one way that we try to solicit student voice. Things like student councils, things like like a principal's cabinet or a superintendent's cabinet, opportunities that we create for kids within the fabric of our schools are critical, because if we don't know what our students are thinking, then we're not going to be able to meet their needs. And the challenge today is that the needs of students are really outpacing, in some ways, our ability to meet their needs. So we also have to be thoughtful and pay attention to things. So in a previous district where I worked, we started to notice that kids were posting things on one of the social media sites that thank you for that, were unfavorable and that sent us a message that they were not feeling safe and supported in their school environment. And so that was on us to follow up and support them and try to get solutions for them.
Managing controversy and navigating conflict amongst stakeholders, including school committee, administrators, staff, families, and the broader community, is a core responsibility of the superintendent. Please describe a situation in which you addressed an issue involving strongly differing viewpoints. How did you balance ethical leadership, transparency, and respect for diverse perspectives while working toward a positive resolution? And then finally, what strategies did you use to build trust and secure consensus?
The situation that comes to mind was several years ago, over Labor Day weekend, I received a phone call from our town administrator. And in the phone call, he informed me that 2 hotels in our town were going to be used as emergency shelters for newcomers to the United States. And, as you know, my school district is very small. We don't have extra room. We don't have classes that aren't filled essentially to capacity. And we had a very small population of English language learners, multilingual learners, and therefore we had a very small cadre of staff to support those students. So almost overnight, we had 24 students who were going to be coming into our school district and needing everything, from food resources to clothing to English language supports, help for families to understand United States education, because for many of those families, they had never been exposed to school in the U.S. So that became both a challenge and it became an opportunity. And I would say that clearly there were very different perspectives on how people received our newcomers. And our job, and what I will always say my job is we are a public school. We serve the students who were in our community, and at that point in time, those students became our community members, as did their families, and our job was to bring them in and get them what they needed. So we kind of rallied the troops and pulled things together in a way that I'm really still not sure how it all happened. But we pulled together a team. We went to the hotel. We conducted the registrations. We had our phones. We were Google translating. We were trying to gather documentation for people who didn't have a whole lot. Our nurses were trying to gather immunization records, and we were also trying to do this without a whole lot of multilingual supports. So at the end of the day, we held an orientation for the students and their families. We secured school buses. We got them in. We provided food. We helped the families to see our schools so they would know, like, where are my children going tomorrow? Because I don't have a car. I don't have access to much of anything here. And they were depending on us. And so we welcomed our students, and at the same time, we hired people to support us. So by the grace of God, we found a trilingual person who wanted to come in and be our family liaison. And so she was kind of our conduit between the school and the hotel and some of the social workers and other people who were involved. And we just kind of battened down the hatches with what's most important for these students. How are we going to begin to acclimate them to school? How are we going to begin to get them English language? We had to get an Uber account because we didn't have a way to transport sick children home, things like that. So the other interesting thing that happened in that situation was, because the town was really nervous and we were really nervous. I mean, that was just the reality. It was a lot for our schools to absorb. And through some of my calls with DESE, we ended up having a visit from the Commissioner of Education. And so we had the town administrator there, school committee members, and I felt that my job at the same time, while welcoming those students and working with our team, certainly wasn't just me, it was lots and lots of people, but I felt strongly that my job was to advocate with the state to say, this is a major hardship in some ways for a very tiny school district. And the commissioner said to me, well, when I used to work in Lawrence, we'd call this Wednesday, Jen. And he said, I can understand how in your district, this is not just any other Wednesday. And that helped us develop a partnership with DESE. We had the students remained with us for, in totality, although the kids themselves changed, for 2 school years. And we are much better for it. Our district is better for it. Our educators are better for it. We have far more of an awareness of who our students and families are. Even though those exact families may not be with us today, we still have students and families who are living in precarious positions, or at the very least, newcomers who need our attention and our, when we talk about belongingness and inclusivity, what are we going to do to make all of our families feel welcomed, and most especially our students? You're welcome.
Can you please share some specific examples of how you have addressed achievement gaps among various student groups, whether looking at anything from test scores to absenteeism data in your previous roles. What data has informed your decisions, and how did you ensure equitable access to high-quality instruction and supports? And how would you apply those strategies to advance equity and student outcomes in Holliston?
When I came to Plainville, one of the most pressing challenges that I encountered was the fact that we didn't have in all content areas a defined general curriculum. So in education, we would call that a Tier 1 curriculum. And if you don't have the basics and you don't have kind of that foundational anchor for our students, that's a huge problem, because you're not going to be able to decipher whether your problem, if students aren't achieving, is it a curriculum problem, is it a student problem, what have you. So one of the first things that I did with our team was very quickly conduct some curriculum reviews and work with DESE through some of the grants that they were offering to especially focus on English language arts as an area of need. And we were able to purchase with support from our town administrator found some grant money that really helped us contribute to the DESE portion of the grant. And so it's always starting with what do you have and making sure that we're positioning ourselves for success for students. The second thing is there are, I don't know, 1 million at least data points that we can use. So for example, we have MCAS data, and we have, one of the things that I noticed when I got to Plainville was that some of our data, not MCAS, we were using a program that assessed students 3 times a year in-house, but it didn't have any way to measure student growth. So we would see a score at the beginning of the year, and then a score in the middle of the year, and a score at the end of the year. But we didn't have any way of really drilling down into that to understand what do those scores mean, and are our kids growing? So we made a shift in the assessment model that we used, and we replaced the current assessment system with a new one, and felt that we had more information to support our decision-making around students. So at the upper levels, some of the things that I would look at are when you talk about equity. And I'm going to try to hit all the pieces, and so some of it will probably feel a little choppy, but what does our attendance data look like? And where are we in the quest to reduce situations of chronic absenteeism? And at one point, we accessed some DESE grant funding. They had a chronic absenteeism grant, and we took that money to create programming for students either at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day to help inspire students to say, oh, today's the day that I get to have extra basketball in the morning, or I get to do something different. I would be interested to look at the secondary level in this town, and I haven't done this yet, to see what do the students look like? What is the demographic of students who are enrolled in our AP classes? What is the demographic of our student who are taking some of those pathways that the school team is putting into place? And do we have a situation where we're seeing that some of our perhaps more marginalized students are not taking advantage of some of the more rigorous opportunities that we offer here because maybe they don't think those classes are for them, and maybe they don't think that they would belong there, and maybe they think they wouldn't be successful. And I think sometimes kids make up their minds, and if we don't do our due diligence to encourage them and really kind of explain the benefits of some of these things, that's on us. And in terms of the data piece, it's very important for us to continually use multiple data points and drill down into our student subgroups. So what does it look like for our low SES kids? What does the data look like for males versus females? What does the data look like for children who do not have English as their first language? What does our special education population look like, and are they showing growth? So those are the kinds of things that I think are applicable no matter where you work, no matter what your town demographic may be, and that is background that I think I could bring to Holliston and share with the educators. I'm confident they're doing plenty of this already. Sometimes a different voice and a different approach might might be helpful. Yesterday, we had an early release day, and the topic of that early release day was how do we use the Open Architects platform, which I know is used in this district, to begin to consolidate data points and turn student need into interventions that teachers can start to use right away in their classrooms with their students.
Can you please describe your philosophy regarding social and emotional learning and its role in student success? What qualitative and quantitative data have you used to assess student well-being and school climate for both students and staff? And how have you led or supported initiatives to strengthen SEL and overall wellness at the school and district level?
That's really, it's almost all we talk about anymore. Of course, we talk about academics, but this is really the challenge that we are facing in our schools. We have kids coming into us that are not emotionally regulated, that have, in some cases, especially when we start looking at kids in grade 5 and up, that have had a disjointed early foundational school career due to COVID and all of that. And it is part of our work. And I think there are cases where people will say, well, that school shouldn't be doing that. School should just be teaching, all the content, and all of that other stuff needs to be dealt with at home. But that's really not our situation anymore. And a lot of what our kids are involved in is also on their devices, and that stuff trickles into the school setting. So our job is to think about what are our core values, what do we think are the things that we hold most dear, that we think are most important in terms of helping students be prepared to work with others, to be successful in the face of adversity, to handle losing with grace. All of those things are critically important. And so at the elementary level, there are a multitude of programs that we use. So in our district, we use Second Step, and we use some teacher-created materials to think about how do we best go through our values. So when we have our acronym of HEART, we talk about empathy, and we talk about honesty, and we talk about respect. And so we focus at certain periods of time on skill development in those areas, and celebrating when we see those core values come to life. So the other things that we tap into are, the CASEL standards, which is kind of the gold standard for social emotional well-being. I'm lacking a better way to say it right now. Our reporting system to families focuses on some of those. How do you manage yourself? How do you work respectfully with others? And it's our job to share that information both with our students in real time and with their families. The other thing that is really important for us, and this is definitely a shift from the state of Massachusetts, and I agree with it, helping students to resolve issues in a fair and dignified way. So a lot of districts, including ours, have gone to more of a restorative practices kind of model, where it's not that, we're going to suspend you for 2 days because such and such happened. Not that that may not happen, but those kinds of approaches have not been found through research to be effective in terms of affecting change with students. And we need to use strategies that help kids reflect, help kids think, help kids take ownership, and that have consequences that are authentic. The other piece kind of to all of this is we really do need to push the professional learning with our staff about SEL, about trauma types of situations that many of our students have experienced, and we may not even know it. It's something that I actually talked about with the police chief in the meeting with him today about the, quote, handle with care approach, which sounds like you're familiar with that, making sure that we have a good line of communication if they're aware of things that may be helpful to us. The other thing that we've done a lot in our district, with the help of our regional wellness director, and I think that you have some of the same programs here, is focusing on how do we get supports for kids who need those supports and families. So Care Solace is one of the support organizations that we work with, and one of the things that we like about them is they offer supportive counseling to students and also families. because to work with a student in isolation without involving parents and family is not always going to be as successful as you would hope. So I think we go with our expectation that we have schools that are safe, where we are respectful of one another, and then we start to add in proactive measures and reactive, responsive measures when needed.
All right, well, this is a little long, so.
Compared to the other ones, right?
Yes. We try to fit everything into each one. And then I have a quick follow-up. But so leading meaningful change often requires challenging long-standing practices, especially if data no longer supports the past practices. Can you please describe a time when you encountered resistance to change from staff or other stakeholders, and how you successfully led the organization forward? What strategies did you use to maintain trust, morale, and momentum? How would you work with union leadership to overcome any initial concerns or objections regarding proposed changes?
We talked about this a little bit in one of the sessions I was in earlier today. So I'll talk about two things, because the first one has to do with resistance. And when I referred earlier to a change in English language arts, one of the challenges that we faced, and if you've, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the podcast that everybody about reading. Sold a Story, was that? Anyway, for years and years and years, teachers have been teaching reading in one specific way. And it's through a model that was put together by 2 educators out of Lesley University, and that was the gold standard for teaching. And those, I remember earlier on in my career as a principal, the curriculum would come packaged in boxes, and each color box would represent a reading level. And so I'd have reading teachers running around going, when am I going to get the teal box? When am I going to get the orange? I need the next box of the books. And they were very, very expensive on top of everything. And then research is now telling us that all of the eggs that we put into that basket were ineffective, and leading us to a place where nationwide, you can look at the nation's report card, which is based on annual national testing of students in grades 4 and 8, and our kids aren't learning how to read. And how can that be? So when I arrived in Plainville, I started receiving questions almost immediately about, how do you feel about the science of reading, and do you think we should be switching, and what are we going to do? And we very quickly had to turn things around and, like I said earlier, capitalize on some funding and bring in some new curriculum. And what happens with that is you always have people who are early adopters who say, yeah, I really want to move in this direction. And then you get people who say, but no, I really just want to hold on to this piece and this piece and this piece because I like it and the kids like the books. And then you get the people who you kind of have to really pull them in. And the way that we did that in this district was by finding a curriculum that we felt met a lot of our needs in terms of diversifying our curricular materials, of bringing that very, very heavily weighted knowledge base, which is what this curriculum is dependent upon, and then adding to that with some of the foundational skills that kids needed in the areas of phonics and phonemic awareness. And after all of that, we recognize that this program, like many programs, is not a standalone, and often one program, no matter how many hundreds of thousands of dollars you put into it, doesn't have every single thing you need. And so this year we've recognized that this program isn't teaching kids how to write. And so when we look at our data, we notice that we're not getting the points on the written component of the MCAS, and when we look at kids writing, we're not seeing what we want. So we identified another writing curriculum, which I was aware of through my work in Hopkinton, that's been very successful, called Think SRSD, and we built capacity on the part of our teachers, starting with our English Language Arts Committee, and we were able to provide training for everyone on that committee, and we were able to help them become teacher leaders. And they were informal leaders, but they fit the bill for what we needed. And we're at the point right now where 2 of those teachers who took that training just completed a course that they taught to their colleagues. So we offered an in-house graduate class taught by a third grade teacher and a fourth grade teacher, and we had 19 teachers take that class, and some of them don't teach reading and writing. Some of them were sixth grade teachers who teach math and science, because we're starting to help people understand that writing and reading and literacy it permeates every content area. And we did that with people originally saying, why in the world would you make us do this when we just bought this new curriculum and we just got used to this, and now you're bringing in something else? And I think we were able to use our research, we were able to use authentic student work samples to help people actually see it for themselves. And so I think sometimes it's that, like, seeing is believing, and you have to start small. And we started this incrementally with a couple of early adopters, and we still have people that aren't all there yet, and we're going to keep moving because we feel that it's that critical and important.
And then just as a quick aside, what do you believe, I guess, is the most powerful word in the English language?
I don't know if I'll be able to tell you I think it's the most powerful, but I don't know, maybe I'll go with potential. And I think that because that's our job. Our job is to tap into potential. It's the potential of students, it's the potential of our staff, it's the potential of what happens when we take these children and we move them through elementary and we get them into a middle school and a high school, and we start to think about their potential as contributing members of our nation. And we really need right now, more than ever, solid, thoughtful, reflective human beings. So that'll be my word of the day. You're welcome.
Advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging requires both courageous leadership and meaningful collaboration. Can you describe Can you describe what a genuine commitment to DEIB looks like in your leadership practice? Can you share some specific examples of how you've advanced DEIB in your current or prior roles, and how you've supported staff learning, aligned systems and policies, and engaged stakeholders in this area? How would you continue and deepen this work in our district?
At a certain point in time when I was working in Hopkinton and we were out for COVID, we had another situation that happened nationally with George Floyd, and we had a bunch of high school kids and teachers who, I mean, the little guys aren't going to figure that out yet, but we had a lot of discontent and a lot of worry at the upper levels. And so there was partnership with our high school principal, with me, with other district administrators to think about what are we going to do and how are we going to reach out to these teenagers and help them navigate through this. And so we partnered with a consulting firm called Ideas, and we brought in some of their consultants to help us and our high school teachers think about ways that we can address some of these challenges with our students as a means of, yes, this is where we are, this is what's happened, and this is how we're going to continue to, you asked earlier about an opportunity for student voice. These are some of the things that we're going to be doing to make sure that we hear you and we're cognizant of what is going on. And sometimes I think kids need to know that we're listening. We don't always have the answers. So after that, I worked with at that same time period, we needed to hire a director of English language learners in Hopkinton. And instead of just doing that, I worked with the superintendent to rename that position. And so we renamed, it's a ridiculously long name, but it was the Director of English Language Acquisition, Equity, and Access. So that is a mouthful. And we gave her a yeoman's task of, how are we going to move this work forward in a district where we were experiencing demographic changes in that town, and we were seeing more brown and black students than white students. And that was a significant change, and there were tensions that we really needed to address. And so we worked together, and especially I'll give a lot of the credit to the high school administration, but we created a course of studies for our freshmen to, we did a couple of things, but one thing was this course that we put into, I think here they call it some kind of a block, DBS block or Direct Study block, and we had something similar in Hopkinton where it was a block where the kids met with a counselor. I can't remember what it was called now, but we identified a certain number of those periods where we brought in a series of speakers to meet with our students and to start addressing some of these issues of identity, marginalized populations. So we brought in someone who represented people who have a disability. We brought in a woman of color, Khalees Warnham, who does a lot of public speaking engagements about DEI around the state of Massachusetts. And we found a really polished speaker. His name is Grant Hightower, and he was also a man of color. And it's hard when you look at a district where it's very, very difficult to attract and retain a diverse candidate pool, because they're not always in existence, and especially when you're looking at like little small suburban towns. So we felt it was important to find experts who had a lived experience, who could share some of that beyond what we could share with our own lived experience. And Grant especially was very communicative with our high school kids, and we also tapped into him to do some teaching with our 8th graders on topics like, what is a microaggression? How do you handle something like that? What does bias mean? And he really did an extraordinary job with our students. And one of the stories that he told us that stuck with me, and this relates to what I said about kids need to know we're listening to them. He told us an anecdote about a time when he was in school and a classmate called him a racial slur, and he said, this happened right in front of the teacher. And he said, I was so angry that I lost my cool in the classroom. And he said, I went to the teacher and said, aren't you going to do something about this? You heard it. The teacher said, well, I didn't hear anything. And so his next move was to turn a desk upside down. And so you can imagine that that did not bode well for him. And I go back and I appreciate that example that he shared, because it does go to show how important it is for us to listen to our kids, even if we can't solve it, even if it's not a perfect scenario, because there isn't always a solution, but there is always and should always be someone who can listen to our kids and help them navigate. And I said in one of the other meetings today, I feel that I've heard from the staff here that people are interested in supporting students in that manner. There is a position in this district that is dedicated to that, but I also really believe that it can't be one person in one position that's responsible for that. This is a collective effort to make all kids feel included and welcomed.
So as you're probably well aware, anti-Semitism is on the rise nationwide, and Holliston has not been totally immune from its own incidents. As superintendent, what actions would you take to address and prevent anti-Semitic incidents and acts of hate more generally?
It's funny, we talk a lot about, when we talk about the concept of bullying, and we say, oh, we're going to teach anti-bullying, and I don't want to talk about the anti stuff. I want to talk about the proactive measures. So those situations like that that come from a place of hate, and it's not that we can teach kids not to do that. We have to think about who we are and what we value and how we address human differences and how we celebrate different identities. And that needs to be done organically through our instruction. And no matter, however, and so that would be through literature, that would be through if you're doing a curriculum review. There are methods and procedures that help educators and leaders assess curriculum for areas of bias. So when we start to really look at how do we do our business, it's to think about how do we set up a situation where we're always moving with the thought of being positive and inclusive and all of those things. And you can do that until you turn blue, but situations are going to happen, and that's real. And so when those situations happen, that's when it would be my job, if I were here, to demonstrate thoughtful leadership, which, number one, is to denounce any kind of act of hatred, anything that has to do with disparaging an individual, a group, a historically marginalized group, a group that has endured that over and over and over. And there are times when, and we do think about this as superintendents, when do you make the statement? So if something happens in another country or another part of the nation, how many times does a superintendent or a leader send a message out to the community? But there are times when you have to, and that would be one of the times when we would need to revisit the things that we feel are our core values, and denigrating one group of people, it's unacceptable in every possible way. And where I think people get into difficulties is when they try to either shove it under the radar, or in a recent situation in Rhode Island where a team had some anti-Semitic activities, and there was an athletic component to that, and that's where you have to lean into where are you going to make a stand. And I think there are a lot of things in these jobs where we say, what are you going to go to the mat for? And what I'm going to go to the mat for is that I don't stand for incidents of hate. And there's no place for that in our schools. That contributes to an unsafe environment. And the minute that you allow that, then you're allowing something else and something else. And you're tearing apart the core fabric of your community, and you're not helping people feel safe. And when those kind of tragic things happen, they're scary and they're off-putting, and they bring up a lot of emotions for people. And when those things happen, I think what people are looking at their leaders for is a sense of calm and a sense of outrage. But that outrage can't be, you got to do it in a way that people are going to listen. So I think it's really important that those things are addressed head on, and then we go back and we reflect and we ask, if it was a student who made that kind of a situation, how are we going to, what kind of sensitivity training are we going to provide? What type of reparations are we going to put together so our student community and their families feel safe, and that anyone who has gone to those measures has an opportunity to learn and hopefully to grow.
Recruiting, hiring, and retaining a high-quality professional teaching and support staff is critical to the success of our schools and students. As superintendent, describe for us your approach to attracting and retaining new staff, including diverse staff, and supporting the ongoing growth of all teachers and paraprofessionals in the schools. What is your role in that process as superintendent? Additionally, what programs have you had success with that you could bring to Holliston teachers, paraprofessionals, and staff to aid in retention?
Finding staff right now, it is a challenge. And especially, if any of you have kids at the secondary level, if you think it's easy to find, a chemistry teacher, an AP bio teacher, a world language teacher, student services, special education, there is a dearth of candidates. They're not out there. So, what do? You tap into every resource that's available. So, for example, you get your jobs out on all of the typical school spring and all of those things. One of the things that we have started looking into this year is Handshake, which is the recruiting or job board that a lot of the colleges use. So when we think about, it's a December hire, maybe there's a kid who just graduated, and so we're in the process of getting ourselves onto the Handshake system, so kids who are looking can see things that we have available. A couple of years ago, this was back when I was in Hopkinton, I partnered with, probably Holliston was part of this, with some of the Metro West area superintendents and assistant supers to run a Metro West area job fair. And we held it actually at Hopkinton High School, and we opened it up to anybody who was interested in coming, any jobs that we had in education. So we all had our little booths and little tchotchkes and cookies that you hand away, with the hopes of really promoting who we are as districts, and that was a nice kind of local collaborative way of looking at that. The other thing that I've done this year, because I really feel committed to this, is I've reached out to a couple of the area universities to ask, how can I be helpful to you in terms of helping to prepare our graduating seniors for job interviews and for how to put their packets together in a way that is going to be attractive to a school district. Now, that's education related. Because what I'm finding is kids come with resumes that have some missing pieces, and I find things that are in their packets that may be philosophically not current, and I am hoping to get a stab at talking to some of these kids. So I got myself on a panel at Stonehill University or college that'll be this spring, and in the process of doing this, I also made a connection with Framingham State University, and they invited me to be part of their advisory board, which is made up of area educators and superintendents. And I think the secondary level, making those partnerships with the colleges and universities, that's number one. I hope to see changes in the way educator preparation programs are going, and two, try to make partnerships and make whatever district I'm working in feel attractive and like a really interesting place to prospective employees. In terms of the retention, that's also hard, because right now, especially and honestly, finding a good kindergarten teacher is really hard. You might think it's not, but that's a different skill set that you don't always, finding a music teacher is hard. So what we really need to do is focus on our mentoring programs and making sure that we're providing our first, second, and third year educators with the support, the skills through a solid mentoring program, and I haven't explored yet what it looks like in Holliston. But one of the things I am interested in, if I were to be fortunate enough to be here, is some regional collaborations. And some of my colleagues, for example, in Milford, they run their mentoring program in concert with, I think, Ashland and Mendon Upton. So you have 3 different school districts partnering together to provide a really strong opportunity where teachers can network with each other and they can network with their colleagues, and things like that, where we can, because teaching, that mentoring program is so important, because there's, I don't know if you've seen any of the graphs, but kind of the trajectory of a new teacher, and it's, this is going great, this is going great, now I'm up on this peak in December, and it's like, wow, this is really my job, and I have to come here every day, and this is really hard. And then, you hope that a teacher will get to the end of the year and say, oh, wow, okay, I made it, renewal time, it's going to be okay. But we have to give them the structures and the supports, and we have to give them the flexibility to make mistakes without feeling that, oh my God, the world has ended.
Okay, so budget question. So obviously budgets are challenged across the state, the country, and while we're mainly here to educate, we can't do that without a strong budget. Can you please describe your role in financial planning and fiscal management in your current or previous districts, however you want to do it? How have you balanced strategic investment in district priorities with responsible stewardship of taxpayer resources? How have you ensured that financial decisions align with the district's mission, strategic plan, and student needs? And then has there ever been a time when you've needed to balance sort of school committee and admin priorities if they've differed, even within kind of the district's priority needs?
So in the district where I am right now, we have a little central office where I work. And so I'm in one office, and right next door to me is the business administrator and the assistant to the business administrator and my secretary, who also doubles as HR. So there's the majority of our central office. And because I entered this district and inherited a budget that was put together in a very rough way. And it was put together in a rough way because the town was experiencing financial challenges, and there was a commitment on the part of the current school committee and the town partners to make something work. And it wasn't going to be great, and we were going to get through it. So we had kind of a reasonable budget to get through the year. We had no growth. We had, some different ways of looking at some extraordinary expenses like out-of-district tuitions and some things like that really did impact our overall dollars that we had. But what came of that was a very, very a lot of focus on that budget in my first year. And so I was learning the superintendency. I also had a finance person who was in her first year. So the two of us were kind of doing this together and learning along the way. And with that, we met monthly with the town administrator and the town finance director, and we conferred very frequently with our school committee and especially our budget subcommittee to make sure that we were doing our part to responsibly navigate the budget that we had been given, and to make sure that we were looking forward at how are we going to try to start building back things that had been eliminated because of drastic budget cuts. So I was fortunate enough to have a really strong coach for the new superintendent program, and her words of advice to me were, get to know your budget, get to know your budget. And I would say at this point, I know the budget intimately, and I remember at the very beginning saying to the business administrator, why do you need that money in that account? And then we'd go through all of the backup sheets, and yep, sure enough, and one of the challenges was, and I'm sure this is the same way in every town, schools take up a lot of the budget, and there's sometimes a feeling that the school has extra money. And so we were kind of put in this place where we really needed to demonstrate and make a case for the money that is in that budget is really the money that we need. And there was no extra or fluff. And so at this point in time, I've partnered with the business administrator. She's since switched to a new person, but I have been very much involved in developing the budget presentations, sharing the budget presentations to the school committee, to the finance committee, to our liaison to the finance committee, to the select board where needed, to our faculty and staff to make sure that they have an understanding. And it is a balance, because I also have to be respectful. We in Plainville are trying to build back from 5 years ago or 6 years ago a really significant budget cut, but so are other departments in town. And so when we say, we're trying to build the schools back, one of our big challenges is some of the other extraordinary things that are out of our control. So the state funding formulas, I think we've talked about this in some of the other meetings I was in today. And so one of the things that I do think is part of my job as a superintendent is to participate in the activities of Mass Association of School Superintendents, to participate in the Superintendent Roundtable, which is represented by many of the Metro West towns, to go to advocacy sessions, which I did this fall when we were asked to, we were given the opportunity to go and testify on Chapter 70 funding, on circuit breaker funding. And those are the drivers. When we sit and we look at our budget and we tease out why are we asking for X percent over last year in a level service budget, because lots and lots of things are going up out of our control, and we can't get in a position where we're putting two entities from our school department against each other. And that's kind of where we're left because of the funding structures. So I feel obligated to the taxpayers, like you said, because no one has extra tax dollars, and we want to make sure we're using them responsibly. And that also ties into the strategic plan, because when we build that budget, we need to know what are our priorities, where are our dollars going. And so I will say right now, the budget that we're presenting, which is a level service budget, we're now calling it the level service budget with an asterisk, because our administrative team has decided that we desperately need more facility support. We don't have enough boots on the ground right now to maintain our 20-plus-year-old buildings, and that is something that we have been very vocal about, that we need it, and it's extra money, but we actually think that's a good use of our taxpayers' revenue, because everybody owns these buildings.
But just quickly, how have you incorporated data, enrollment trends, and program evaluations as you work on your budget?
I mean, those are always parts of things. So we always, some districts will contract with NSDAQ and they provide you with projections. Where I am right now, that hasn't been necessary based on the size of the district. But what we do is we tap into the town census. So we have one of our secretaries begins that work of digging in and looking at who are our incoming students, what are their birth dates, what do we project for kindergarten. So for example, for the upcoming year, we have had to already make the decision to eliminate a kindergarten classroom, not because of budget woes, but because we don't think we're going to have enough kids to take the class spots that we have right now. So we look carefully at rolling up our kids from one grade to the next, and we do not have a class size cap in my district right now, but we have a goal of 18 to 22 students per class. We try to be reasonable, and so we bear those things in mind as we build. We look at things like we've had fluctuation in our multilingual learners. So we had a small number, the number was growing, then we had newcomers, and the number really grew. And now next year, we're moving back towards baseline. So that's an area that we have to look at to kind of see where does that all shake out for the upcoming year. We have to look at our students who are in some of our specialized programs within the district and look at cohorts of kids to decide, do we need to build another program? Do we need to amend some of the specialized programs that we currently have? So all of those things we kind of go into play as we think about what do we require for the upcoming year. It's never just that we had this and now we need this again. It's what do we need now to support the kids that are in front of us. You're welcome.
Okay, as you may be aware, in December, the MSBA invited us to the eligibility period for potential renovation or replacement of our 56-year-old high school building. As our new superintendent, you will be intimately involved in this process, working closely with our town officials, as well as planning for new and innovative instructional spaces with the school committee, staff, and families. So please describe your experiences with capital building projects, such as construction of a new building or school, and share with us some of the vision and opportunity that you see in creating this brand new and innovative learning space. And then also, how would you include the voices of administrators, faculty, staff, and families in that whole decision-making process?
When I was looking at some of your documents for preparation for today, I did watch the school committee meeting where you had one of your select persons here, and it was, I think, it might have been the night before MSBA was officially saying that that this was happening, and it was very exciting to watch that meeting and to see the enthusiasm on the part of the town for the potential for this project. So I think right away that gives me a clue about how this town is going to be considering and approaching this really exciting project. So yes, I have been part of MSBA projects. When I was hired as the principal of the Lincoln Street School in Northborough, the superintendent said, "This is so great that you're here because now we're about to start a building project, and this is going to be, really good experience," and it sure was. They were at the point where we were hiring the architect, the owner's project manager, so I was really in on the ground floor of all of the planning and execution of the project. And it was a complicated project. It was a relatively small elementary school, but the school, it was a 1960-something, and it required, what we ended up deciding on was a full renovation with an addition while occupied. So we had to lease 10 modular classrooms. So over the summer before construction started, we had, the company came in, they erected the new wing. We had to move one wing of the school into the modular wing, knowing that halfway through the year we were going to flip. And so those classes that were in the modulars were going to move to a brand new renovated wing of the building, while others were going to move elsewhere. We had construction people on site all the time. We had fields that were dug up to make room for the new gym that was added. We had a lot of family communications because we had a lot going on. We had a lot of work with our project manager because we had the obvious safety concerns, making sure that everybody who came on site was Corey cleared, and all of that stuff that you don't have to think about if you're building a building over there. A lot of work with our fire, police. We even had voting in the schools at that time, so we had to figure out how to get voters into the modular classrooms, and there were a lot of moving parts. And there were a lot of meetings. There were weekly meetings. I attended pretty much all of them. I still serve as a reference for the project management company and the architect, and I remember our town manager saying, we've wrapped up a project and everyone is still speaking to each other, and that's really, you want to talk about a measure, that's a really great measure of how successful a building project was. And it was a lot of work, and it was well worth it, and our students had this really beautiful, amazing environment. And to your other question, one of the things about the MSBA is they are experts in this work. And the vendors who come in, your architect, your project managers, they're all used to working with the MSBA. So there are so many meetings, there are so many opportunities for voice. And right down to, did you like those triangular shaped desks, or do you like the octagonal shaped desks? Do you like this? Do you like that? The food service director coming in, what do you think about how you want to run food out of this building? And drop off and pick up, and what do your traffic patterns look like? All of those pieces, I'm not sure there was a stone unturned. Kids got involved, and we made a time capsule of things, and I don't know, it's buried there somewhere now. But so we, to the greatest extent, we encouraged all of that involvement, and we really also needed our family involvement because it all required votes. So, we needed a vote at town meeting, we needed a vote at the ballots, and we had an extraordinary group of families and community members who understood the importance of this, and they got it done.
Right. How do you I'll break this on in two, because it is another long one. Let's train this tonight. How do you define leadership, and how do you demonstrate that with your leadership style? What particular strengths do you believe you will bring to our school system?
There's a phrase called servant leadership, and as I look at that, I really think that matches what I think these jobs are. So my job is not to run around here or anywhere else and tell people, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Sometimes you have to, but for the most part, my job is to serve. My job is to serve a community. My job is to serve students. My job is to make sure that we have a school district that all of you and the community members and the taxpayers can feel proud of. And my job is to help inspire people to all row in the same direction, or at least to have conversations when we're not. And my job is to help other people do their jobs. And I think that there are so many different people who make up a school district, and I said this in one of the other meetings today, that I feel like you can equate it to an orchestra. And when you have music that you need to make, you have a conductor who helps kind of send signals, and that conductor might give people training and some instruction. But at the end of the day, you need every single one of those pieces of that orchestra to come together to make really to make the magic happen. And I do feel that in leadership, if you want to move in that way, you need to be a person who's humble, you need to be a person who's reflective, you need to be someone who's willing to listen, and sometimes you don't like what you hear, but you have to be able to take it in and think about it. And I really do think about how it really comes down to, honestly, as simple as the golden rule. And when people come in my office and, they ask me a question, I think all the time about how would I want to be treated if it was me going and asking a question or messing up. That I hear that a lot from people. Oh my God, this went wrong. This is terrible. You're going to be upset. No, barring the obvious, like terrible, horrific things, which don't usually happen. So I think, was the other question, how do I inspire?
What are particular strengths you believe you'll bring to our school system?
I think that answer I've probably already touched on. You just have to be a real person. And I think people really respond to someone who demonstrates humanity. And one thing that I do think I'm pretty good at is reflecting on myself and my own actions and decisions, and owning when I think I could have done better. So I think those are the things that have helped me, and I've been doing this for a little while now, and I think it's proved for the most part successful. You're not always going to make everybody happy, and that does eat away at me because a lot of us in education are people pleasers. But at the end of the day, if you're honest with people and you demonstrate that bit of humility, I think it goes a long way.
Is that the third part to that question?
Oh, I can't talk anymore. I'm sorry, Frank.
All good. It's along the line, so we can keep this short. But how would you adapt your leadership approach or adapt new skills? What new skills would you need to develop when moving from a K through 6 district to Holliston, which has 2,650 students across 4 schools with specialized programs like French immersion and Montessori?
I think what I've learned over time is that if you have the basic skills and you have the basic relationships with people, you figure it out. And I am being entirely genuine when I say a big part of the reason for why I'm interviewing for this job here tonight is because of what I think I can do to help support our upper level learners. And no, it's not, your high school teachers will say she never taught a high school class, and I can't dispute that. But I do think that the work that I have done in, for example, Hopkinton, where I was the primary evaluator for a number of the department heads, world language, science and engineering, music and art, I spent an inordinate amount of time learning about that level, hearing the needs, adapting to what people need, and partnering with them. We plan programs together, and those things, I'm thinking specifically about a summer where we did a program for students who were at risk of not graduating from high school, and we did a program for students who needed a lot of credit recovery. And I am not the person who's going to be teaching them a high school level math, but I tapped into our math leader, who was extraordinary. And so a lot of it is just being able to assess the situation and analyze needs. And you raised your hand, so I think I might be out of time.
Could you please share how you work with your administrators, staff, and the school committee to develop a vision long-range plans and annual goals that build trust, strengthen relationships, and bring the community together around the success of students? And how do you report progress toward reaching such goals and measuring their outcomes? And how do you think the school committee should evaluate you on that progress? So strategy and plans, reporting progress, and evaluation by school committee.
So part of the new superintendent induction program is working to develop your strategic plan. And I was really fortunate to have a coach in the new super program who one of her specialty areas was planning for success, which is the DESI model for strategic planning. And she offered to do this work with me and for our district in partnership. So in my first year, we made a one-year plan. And we focused on the big boulders that we knew had to be addressed right away. And then we moved into part 2, which was the multi-year strategic plan. And that was a group that included all kinds of stakeholders, from the community, from our schools, teachers, administrators, parents. We didn't have kids on it, but it wasn't really appropriate for our age group, but I would have if it was secondary. And our work was to start with envisioning the future. And if we look out into the future, how do we want to see the Plainville Public Schools? Or if it was here, how do we want to see the Holliston Public Schools? And we went through a multitude of steps to talk about what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are what are the things that are going to hold us back, what are our opportunities, and how are we going to capture that, and then begin to take what we found and turn our findings into goals. And so we came up with a plan that isn't all that dissimilar from the plan that you have here. And the plan was full of measurable goals. So we had goals about teaching and learning, social emotional, professional learning, operations and management. And there was also a lot of overlap between some of the areas, but each area has its own set of measurable goals and timelines. So our job, and my job as kind of the leader of our administrative group, is to manage and monitor our progress on the goals in that plan. So we will use a number of our administrative meetings to say, we're going to pull out that strategic plan again, and everyone goes, yay, can't wait. But that's what we need to do. We need to look at where are we, and the more that we do that, we're keeping ourselves true to our commitments. And the commitment is to get us to the goals that we as a collective, many stakeholders decided that were important. So mid-year, I take all of the information after we've done our check-in, and I put it into a digestible format and bring that to the school committee, where we say, okay, and that's actually coming up at our next meeting, where are we? What did we accomplish? What are we still working on? And that will all be part of my evaluation. It's not the only thing I'm evaluated on, but because it's our roadmap, and it's also the roadmap that our buildings use as their kind of North Star when they build their school improvement plans. And we refer a lot to, well, that's in our strategic plan, and so we kind of talk about that, and when we're in meetings with teachers and we talk about, well, this mass tiered, tiered system of supports, that's a big area in our plan. Health and wellness curriculum, that's a big area in our plan, and among other things. And so I would say those are big parts of how I am evaluated and how I present evidence to the school committee when you're the person who gets to put all that together.
Well, I think we can say thank you for answering our questions. We really appreciate, this has been a long day, but we are thrilled that you were able to be with us, and just thank you for coming to our district. Is there anything kind of in closing that you'd like to share with us in support of your candidacy?
One thing I don't know if I remembered to say to this group was about the interactions I had with the students at the middle and high school. Did I talk about that with this group? I did?
I think you touched on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that the time with the high school kids and the middle school kids, they were extraordinary. And I think, you should be really proud of the types of questions that they asked, the responses, their ability to interact. There were 0 devices in the area, and they asked questions of me, like, what was important to me and who am I, and where would I be during the day? Would I be in their classrooms? Would I be in an office? And they were very free with sharing things that they really liked, and it was really refreshing. And so they represented all of you and all of your educators and their families really well. And I feel like this was a really productive day, and it was a long day and there was a lot, but I am grateful for this opportunity, and being able to connect with different constituencies and stakeholders was very valuable. And you have an amazing district here, and I appreciate that you have areas for growth, because we all do. But there's a lot, there's a reason why I knew this was going to be an interesting place and a special place to consider, and I found that to be validated today. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
All right, we're all set.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Dawn.
I think motion to adjourn.
Second by Dawn.
And all in favor? Yes. All right, good night. Good night, Holliston. Thank you. And thank you.